Welcome, everyone, to the Thrively 180, an educators roundtable on building a strengths-based school culture. We're so excited to have you here with us today. Today's conversation is really about student experience. What does it actually feel like for students to move through a learning environment where strengths, well-being, hope, and connections are intentionally embedded into the culture every single day? Not just during launch, not just during the first weeks of school, not just during professional development, but across 180 days. Because building a strengths-based culture is not a one-time initiative. It is built through repeated experiences, conversations, relationships, reflection, and intentional practices that shape how students see themselves over time. And ultimately, culture is not something students simply hear about. It's something they feel consistently. So today you'll hear directly from educators sustaining this work across real learning communities, real implementation challenges, and real student experiences. Peter, I'll turn it over to you for just a few quick logistics before we jump in today.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Jasmine. Before we jump into our 60-minute session, just a few quick logistics like Ms. Jasmine mentioned. Today's webinar is designed to feel conversational, interactive, so please feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A question box throughout the session. We'll also leave time at the end for reflection and questions. More than anything, we hope today feels practical, honest, and usable. We want today's conversation to feel grounded in the real work of supporting students every single day. So we're going to share the wins, the challenges, the sustainability, and the moments that make this work meaningful over time. And before we move into the actual conversation itself, we want to start with a quick reflection, right, Ms. Jasmine?
Absolutely. This is the first opportunity that we get to engage with one another. So, first question. When you hear the phrase strengths based school culture, what is one word that comes to mind? I want you to go ahead and drop that in the chat. So, I will start by modeling. When I hear the phrase strengths based school culture, the word that comes to mind is connection. Peter, what about you?
So for me, and the word that comes to mind and it really puts it all together for me, it's humanizing.
Wow, that's a good one, Peter. And I'm seeing the chat going as those words are coming in. Notice how human those words actually are. I think about some other words like belonging, confidence, joy, voice, hope, connection. Most importantly, none of those experiences happen by accident. They happen when adults intentionally create environments where students feel seen, where they feel known, valued, and supported. And that's exactly why we brought this amazing panel together today to move beyond talking about straight space learning conceptually and talk about what it actually looks and feels like in practice. So our next step here, so we've engaged in the chat a little bit. So now we're going to do a very honest educator check-in, Peter. So here's your permission to be honest with us today. Because it is May, some of us are thriving, some of us are surviving, and some of us are being held together by iced coffee, calendar reminders, and pure commitment to children. And as you look at this tree, think about your learning community and yourself during the real 180. Not August optimism, not back to school professional development energy. I mean, right now, testing season, staff fatigue, end of year behaviors, missing Chromebook chargers, field trips, awards days, and somehow still trying to sustain a strengths based culture through all of it. So take a look at the visual and choose a number that either best represents where your school, organization, or team is right now, and maybe even you. And yes, you are absolutely allowed to choose number four, which is the person lying on the ground. You're absolutely welcome to choose the number four. But Peter, our model again, I will say at this very moment at 2:06 at May 21st, I'm a solid number 10. What about you?
Perfect. I see tens, I see 11s, I see 16s on the chat. For my
Yes.
yes, I love it. Thank you everybody for sharing. Thank you. I see a
Thank
15. Perfect. No fours yet, so that's I guess
I don't
we're in
know,
a
but
good
16
place.
is absolutely hilarious.
14, 7. So for me, Miss Jasmine, I automatically during this time of the year, I automatically switch to a number two. How could I support? How could I help? I know it's that time of the season.
I love it. And honestly, Peter, hearing and seeing the range in the chat is such an important reminder that sustaining culture across 180 days is deeply human work. And that reality is exactly why today's conversation matters. So, you're hearing us talk about 180, the reality of the 180. One reason we wanted to center today's conversation around the Thrively 180 is because many schools experience excitement at the beginning of the year. There's excitement, momentum, energy, vision. But the real challenge is, how do we sustain that? What happens in October? What happens in January? What's happening right now during testing season? Staff fatigue, student disengagement, competing initiatives. How do we continue creating environments where students feel connected, they feel hopeful and known, even when the school year becomes difficult? That's the real work. And that's exactly why we wanted today's panel to feel grounded in real implementation experiences, not just theory. So, our panelists are speaking from lived experiences across an entire school year. So, Peter, can you ground us in what we'll explore together today in our 60 minutes?
Absolutely, Miss Jasmine. Thank you. Thank you. So throughout today's conversation, we'll explore what strength-based culture actually looks like across a full school year, Miss Jasmine. From student identity and engagement to family connection to sustaining culture over time, today is really about the lived experiences behind the work. Together, we'll explore strength-based practices, how they shape students' identity and voice, what students' engagement and ownership actually looks like in practice, how schools-centered experiences ways families become part of our conversation, and the daily practice of sustaining culture across, as you said, 180 days of school. And ultimately, sustaining the strength-based culture is not about one initiative or, as you mentioned, one strategy. It's about the repeated experiences our students have each and every single day of those 180 days. But before we move into conversation itself, Ms. Jasmine, I want to briefly for you and I to introduce ourselves.
Absolutely, Peter. Yes, we are just here to facilitate, but we do serve as your Thrively partners in this space. Again, I'm Jasmine Cox, Director of Customer Success here at Thrively, and I have the opportunity to support schools and learning communities as they implement strengths-based practices that strengthen student identity, belonging, and engagement. And joining me today is my amazing colleague, Mr. Peter Barajas. Peter.
Thank you, Ms. Jasmine. As you said, I'm Peter Barajas. I'm your customer success manager here at Thrively. And I also have the opportunity to work alongside educators, communities focused on strengthening engagement, belonging, and relationship-centered learning environments. One of these things that we're both most passionate about is helping schools move this work from ideas into daily student experiences. And honestly, that's exactly why we're so excited about today's conversation.
We are so excited about the conversation. So much so, Peter, can you just tell our guests a little bit about how you're so passionate? Because if I remember, you just retired, right? Tell us.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ms. Jasmine. So, as Ms. Jasmine mentioned, I had the pleasure of being providing my services for the same district for 35 years. I started there as a substitute, worked in preschool, early education, 10 years in middle school, and ended my career as a program supervisor for the expanded learning programs. And I was retired and this is Ms. Jasmine, I think your favorite part, I was retired for 4 whole months. Yes, 4 whole months before, like I said, my passion came knocking on my door and saying, you're not done. And I truly believed in the power of Thrively. We had implemented it for 2.5 years before my retirement, and just that impact that it has in students, it was worth coming out of retirement.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for sharing. I love to share this story. But enough about us, Peter, because
Yes,
today
yes,
is
I
going to
agree.
be about the educators and the leaders doing this work every single day. So we are incredibly excited for you to hear from these educators joining us.
Perfect. Before they introduce themselves, again, what makes today's conversation especially powerful is that each panelist brings a different lens to student experience and culture building, Ms. Jasmine, from executive leadership to advocacy and belonging to learner-centered education to student services and to daily implementation. Different student experiences, different communities, different implementation journeys. And together, these perspectives help us better understand what sustaining culture actually looks like across 180 days. So we love to begin by allowing each panelist to briefly introduce themselves. So could we begin with Jocelyn?
Yeah, Jocelyn, let's start
Jocelyn.
with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Hey everyone. Hi, Jasmine and Peter. Thank you for having me. My name is Joshua Nedman. I am the grants coordinator at Careless Online Academy. I'm here with my executive director, Pamela Seeger. And I have a strong background in criminology and criminal justice, but just came over into the education field as of almost 2 months ago. So super
Welcome.
excited to see how, Thrively works with the school and applying my background to the school environment.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. We really appreciate that. And we'll pass it on to Tamaya.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tamaya Hines. I'm a director here at Spark Hub Collective here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you so much for Thrively for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And Miss Pamela.
Thank you, Miss Jasmine. So Jasmine knows I'm probably one of the biggest cheerleaders for Thrively. I've known Thrively now for my gosh, over 5 years. But my background, I'm an executive director at Carolus Online Academy, which is a K-12 Stride powered school. We've got 92 schools across the United States. And so we are a virtual education school choice route. And my I've been with them for a little over 14 years, so just working to serve students, in particular underserved students in the state of South Carolina. Nice to be here and nice to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. And Maggie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Wynn. I'm with Boys and Girls Club of Westminster, and I run an after-school program at one of our elementary sites, Mears Elementary. Been here for a long time, 10 years here at this school, and we have first through fifth grade. So yeah, we're just excited to be a part of the Thrively family.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And David.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm David Johnston here. I'm also an after-school educator in the city of Westminster. I've been in this position about 4 years now, and yeah, I'm very similar to Maggie. I have a group of first through sixth graders at my site, and just very happy to be here as well. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And Mr. Ray.
Yes, thank you for that, guys. My name is Raymond Ramirez. I'm the Area Director of Student Services here for the Boys and Girls Club of Westminster. We actually run Thrively at all 6 of our after-school program sites. So I oversee all that and connect with Peter on, a weekly basis to ensure that, we always have we're always on top of it. So it's been a fun journey with Thrively up to this point, and, we look forward to continuing it.
Love it. And Mr. Ryan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan. Like how Maggie and David said, I run an after-school site in Westminster. My site is at Fabric Elementary School. Our program have first to fifth grade, and happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you all again for being here with us today, Peter. I'm really, really excited. So we've chunked this off into some sections. We're getting ready to dive into section 1. And one of the most powerful things about strengths-based environments is that they change the way students see themselves, not just academically, but also personally. So students begin developing language for who they are, how they learn, what they contribute, and where they thrive. And when that shift happens, voice often follows right behind it. So let's begin there with identity, voice, and belonging. So Pam, I'd love to start with you from a leadership lens. When you think about building a strengths-based culture, what were some of the first shifts that had to happen in how adults viewed students?
Well, I'm going to tell you, this is going to go back to something that Garish told me, my gosh, probably almost maybe 4 years ago when I first met him through Habits of Mind, the Institute of Habits of Mind, which I'm so thrilled that Thrively partners with them and you both endorse each other. But he said that, one thing that's really challenging for students is to be able to answer, who they are. Who are they? Such a challenging question for, and arguably even for adults, anyone, every human being. But when you think about it, if a child is having a difficult time being able to answer that question, it is of utmost paramount responsibility of that we help them figure out how to answer that question. So I think that the student identity and voice, what we have to do first is we have to teach them to have autonomy. We have to teach them to be able to understand I love what you guys say so much. I see someone who is here in the audience, and I shared this with her. But I love that your mission is what's strong with you. And so I think that what we had to do as a school, even arguably before I even came over to Carolus, because I've only been with them for just a touch over 2 years, but we really had to work with students and redefine what it is to have strengths and capitalize on those strengths in order to help them overcome some of the challenges that they have. So really to be able to take those strengths assessments and to identify those 5 paramount areas that makes us so uniquely us. And really try to capitalize on them so that we could change that positive culture and lens for the students. So I think that was probably what was the most critical for us. Also, we're an online school. So we have students that are as young as 5 years old, all the way to 12th grade. And so I always say we've got almost 1,800 souls that we are responsible for at the school level, with approximately 100 adult souls who need to make sure that we have the same mission in putting kids first. And that can be very challenging, whether it's brick and mortar or virtual. So really being able to work with children and understand that they all have their own story, that they all have capabilities. It doesn't matter what their exceptionalities are, and that we really need to overcome the biases that exist so that we can help partner with them and strengthen them, and allow them to see how colorful and potential their future is. So I just think that's where we needed to start as a school, and that's when I became introduced with you, Jasmine, and you've been such a force for us at the school. We've had change and turnover at our school. That can also be very difficult for children because they look for us for stability and strength. And so when you have that, it can really shift that culture in a negative lens. But we were able to have such a successful year, in part because of Thrively, in part because of Habits of Mind and these partnerships, and being able to change the story and put the mission truly, which it should be everyone's mission. If you're in education, you need to put kids first. Period. End of story. I think once you do that and you all share the mission, doesn't matter what school they go to. We should not be competing with each other. We should be laying groundwork and roadmaps and repairing bridges, understanding that if we don't work together to foster and cultivate building student identity and helping them answer, who am I? Then we're disservicing the children.
Damn, that's so good. And I want to lean in just a little bit more, what helped move the work from being viewed as another initiative? We talk about all these partnerships that we have and all these things. One more thing to do. One thing we say here at Thrively, it's not one more thing to do. It is the thing to do, right? So what helped move the work from being viewed as another initiative into something people genuinely began believing in?
Yeah. So a lot of that was you. I'm not trying to pat you on the back, but let's just be honest, because it is partnerships. I think because you also share in that vision and that mission, and you also have an alternative route in how you are educating your own children. I think that you were able to see the need that we had, and I think that was part of it, is just building that relationship. Also, I think that when you fall, when you fail, and it's okay to fail, you have to own it, and you have to build from within. And I think that's something that we were able to do. So I do attribute that to the relationship that we were able to cultivate with you. Again, I don't work for Thrively. I don't work for Habits of Mind. I work for Carolus. But I love them so much because they really do put the mission of children first. And, by the time they come to us in a cyber platform, something happened. You don't just wake up one day and say, "Oh my gosh, Carolus Online Academy, where have you been all my life? I'm 5 years old. I'm going to your school tomorrow." You don't do that. You come to us because something happened and something failed along the way. And unfortunately, you may not, And as adults, something did not go well in our child's life. And so you're looking for parent choice and school choice, and you choose whatever route is best. And, and that might not be cyber for all kids. And that's wonderful. That's why parents have that voice. But I think it was the tenacity not to give up. It
Yeah.
was you not giving up on us, because we had turnover, but you not giving up on us, you staying in contact with us working on this beautiful partnership as well with Habits of Mind with Dr. Benna Kalik and Dr. Art Costa and Craig, Juanita, like Pat, all these wonderful people that are from there. And I think that it takes a community. So all these people coming together to recognize Carolys's strengths, what's strong with us, and then help us identify where we needed help with parent engagement, with that buy-in, with students believing in themselves again. Because again, remember, by the time they get to us, oftentimes they think that there's no hope left. Like this is my last chance. There's no hope. I'm probably not going to make it here. So we had to change the dialogue. We had to change the language, and we had to shift that culture.
Wow, Peter, this is already
Wow.
going to be a good. I've got the heebie-jeebies.
Yes. Yeah,
Pam, thank you
absolutely.
so much, Peter.
Absolutely.
This
Yes.
is
And,
gonna be a good one,
thank you,
Peter.
Pam. And I know I heard, something that kind of gave me the goosebumps, putting students first, and absolutely, we should always put students first. And then also you said not giving up, that we're not giving up on our students. We're not giving up. We're there for them. And I also heard in that response, the idea that culture shifts with how students are experiencing by adults. And that naturally raises a larger question around identity, around belonging, and who gets fully seen within the system. So on that note, Jocelyn, from an advocacy and belonging perspective, how have you seen strength-based environments change the way students are seen, especially students who have historically been defined through deficit rather than possibilities?
Yeah, so my background, as I said before, is more focused in criminology and criminal justice, and the juvenile system as a whole is like my niche. And so I've spent a lot of time studying like systems and patterns, especially, what happens when institutions define people by those deficiencies instead of what they're actually good at, what they're strong at, and the potential that they have, right? And so in both education and judicial systems, labels are pretty predictive. We have a lot of stereotypes, a lot of stigmas that go along with students based on their racial or socioeconomic or where they live, how they dress, kind of thing. They're pretty predictive, right? And so when people are repeatedly, especially young people, repeatedly identified through those deficiencies or through those lacks or those stereotypes, they start to internalize those deficiencies, and they start to believe, well, I am no more than this label, right? And so schools have a unique opportunity to either reinforce those, or they have the opportunity to then change it and interrupt that cycle. So one of the major theories that I studied and really, really do fall in love with and believe is a pathways theory. And Jasmine and I talked about this at length, but really talks about that everyone is on a different pathway based on, who they are, what kind of environment they were born into, the people that they come in contact with, the environments that they are exposed to, the opportunities that they are exposed to. So what and who in their life happens, right? And so having a strength-based environment then changes their pathway or their trajectory, because students can then experience themselves as being, just capable of able to do things, of seeing the potential in what they're doing and seeing their strengths. And instead of what's wrong with you, like Pam was saying, what's strong with you, we love that statement, right? And so once they have that sense of belonging, that sense of, well, I'm a part of something bigger than me. I am more than what you label me to be. We start to see it better attendance, better academic performance, better participation and engagement, less or lower discipline referrals. And then, they're less likely to disengage or enter punitive systems later on in life through those pathways, because they then have been exposed to positive impacts and influences throughout their life, right? And so I do want to say that teachers, they definitely have an enormous influence on their students, because I think Pam mentioned this too. Their relationships are often the strongest protective factor for students. They're often the first ones, other than students, immediate family, to come into their life and disrupt or reinforce the pathways that they've been put on.
Jocelyn.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jocelyn.
That's good, Jocelyn.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's
And,
good.
yes, like I said, it's just again goosebumps, because it's so real and experience. But even to dive a little deeper, Jocelyn, you mentioned labels, and that's one thing that we really push in Thrively. We say you're not a label, you're not a grade doesn't identify, you're not your identity. Jocelyn, what does it look like when students begin feeling genuinely known rather than simply managed within a system, as you mentioned?
Yeah, for me, there's a phrase I always go by: to be loved is to be seen, right? Or to be known. And this is a very vulnerable time for students, for people in their life during that pivotal moment of, I'm learning who I am, I'm being exposed to new things, and this is my learning gap, for lack of better words, right? And so when you feel loved, you are much likely to trust others, to participate more, to put your guard down, to feel less self-protective and not be in that fight or flight mode, right? And so they're willing to make mistakes. They're willing to say, hey, I made mistakes, but like Pam said, we fail, but we get back up. We keep going. We're persistent in what we're doing, because I know that I have a strong support system standing behind me, and I'm not limited to the label that's been placed on me. I am bigger than that, right? And so the other thing, again, with teachers, you are, a lot of people don't realize how much impact they have on other people, right? Pam put in the chat, we don't know what people are going through currently day to day. Like, you could be going through something right now, but you're the biggest smile on your face, right? And so the smallest thing can change how you interact with people. And my grandmother always said, the axe may forget, but the tree will always remember. Right? So teachers, you're coming in and you're greeting students in a nice way. You yourself are dressed in a very nice way. You have a very positive outlook. You're noticing small changes, like maybe you played with someone yesterday, but you're not playing with them today. You're asking questions. You're consistently reaching out to them. You're, giving respect publicly and privately. As a teacher, a lot of times we think, well, as your, elder, you should just have respect, just to have respect. Regardless, you should still give students respect and give them that space to then grow and empower themselves, because you're pouring into their cup. So, with students, they want to know that they are in a trusted environment and with trusted, respectful, and responsible adults to be themselves, to grow into their full selves.
And you know what, Jocelyn, I love that you said that, because don't we sometimes set it up as people, as human beings? It's innately within our nature that we might test people. Like, how much can we trust you? How much can we depend on you? Students can do the same thing. They're humans. They're just little humans. So they may be testing as well, just to see how much do they care? How receptive are they going to be to my needs? How much do they see me as you said? So I think those are all things that we need to consider. I love what you said about labels too, Jocelyn, because, a child could be considered gifted. That child may think that is the worst label in the world. They may not like that. So again, we're making assumptions, and it's really dangerous to make assumptions. And that's where it starts with us to kind of change that language and change that framework around how we are conversing with them. Because, our kids are bright, whether they get an A or an F, most likely is just inherent based upon everything that they have endured and gone through in life. But they are highly intuitive, and, they really are looking to us to lead them through all of life's challenges.
This work is about humanizing learning, Peter.
Humanizing, that's what I said, right? It puts it all together, humanizing.
Humanizing learning. And thank you both for being able to share there. And, we know that when students are they consistently feel seen, they often see themselves, these learner-centered environments are really positioning them to be the best that they can be. So Tamaya, I would love to switch over here with you. So in learner-centered environments, students often feel the culture before they can actually articulate it. So, what are some intentional ways that you help students feel known, valued, and connected from the very beginning?
Yes, so just from my experience, I do believe students begin forming opinions about an environment within the first few moments. So anything that you do, like Miss Pamela was saying, anything that you do, they're watching. I intentionally learn about students, asking about their personalities and making sure their voices are visible in the classroom. And I always try to check in consistently, creating routines where every student feels seen and included. Because once that personality starts to come out, it's every day, and every day is great.
They feel safe. They feel safe.
Yeah, I just want students to feel that they belong here and what they bring matters.
Absolutely. And because of that, what shifts have you seen in students once they begin understanding themselves through strengths rather than comparing themselves to their peers, their brothers, or who they actually were yesterday, right? Sometimes we can get in that space. Who I am today is not who I was yesterday. So what
Yes.
shifts have you seen in students once they begin understanding themselves through strengths?
The biggest shift I have seen is confidence.
Wow.
Students who were quiet are now out and about, loud, first to answer, ready to do, like say what's next, what do we do now? Confidence that they once lacked is at the forefront. So
Wow.
that's just great to see, just the confidence that just bloomed. And they could have just been in the back, just moving along.
Wow. Yeah.
And just to know that that's came to the front matters the most. And that's the biggest thing I've seen is the confidence.
Wow. I love that, Peter.
I love it. I love it. Like I said, the confidence. And Miss Jasmine, I think what's becoming clear throughout this section is that identity shapes engagement. When
Mm,
students, as you see, when students begin seeing themselves differently, everything else begins to shift along with them. And
absolutely.
so as we do that, so let's move into what happens when students begin internalizing belonging. Like Ms. Tamaya said, when their confidence boosts, right? And they take ownership of themselves and over time start
Love
to
it.
own who they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Peter, you ready for section two, engagement?
Section two, here we go.
They kind
Section
of walked
two.
us into it, Peter. I think I'm
Yes,
ready.
absolutely. So section two, when students begin understanding themselves through strengths, something deeper often shifts. Engagement, confidence, risk-taking, participation, ownership. And most powerful part of this is students themselves begin driving the culture.
Mhm.
And again, that student voice, when they start driving the culture, we're headed in the right direction. So let's talk honestly about how this work looks like over the course, as we said, 180 days, Miss Jasmine. Ryan, I love to start with you here. So Ryan, what are some practical ways your team intentionally embedded strengths, hope, well-being, or connections into everyday student experiences rather than treating them as separate activities?
Pretty much every trimester, we have club of activities for the kids. We base off of what they like. For example, this third trimester, my kids love sports and arts. So I divide it into they love they love playing dodgeball, basketball, and for sure we have a Friday for soccer because Friday soccer is the best day because soccer's always have issues. They always like to fight over each other. So
So
that's
they
why we
take it
only have
seriously.
yeah,
Yes.
that's why we only have soccer on Friday. And for
Perfect.
like I said, arts, a lot of my kids loves arts. So we designated a couple of days for arts, hence arts and craft and other type of art for the kids.
I love that.
Perfect.
I love that. I was going to say, Peter, I love that there's no assumptions behind that either because we have clear data that shows what their interests and aspirations are once we call that out through our industry's first strengths assessment, right? So I love that, Ryan, you've been able to use that data to kind of help shape the experiences in those activities based on our student interests. So that I love that. Sorry, Peter, about that.
No, and I love that you said that because as we know in before in expanded learning, it was always guesswork, and now as we continue to meet with the teams, it's that guesswork is taken out, and we're using that data, right? As Mr. Ryan said, sports. Okay, what sports do they like? And we're no longer guessing. We're using that data and looking at the percentage, the high percentage. They like soccer. Oh, we're going to do a soccer club, right? So I love that. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Even to dive a little deeper. What routines or practices made the biggest difference in maintaining consistency in your program throughout the year?
Pretty much it has to be consistent throughout the year. Because if we change up the sports, we'll hear from them. So so 2 days for soccer, wait, 1 day for soccer, 2 days dodgeball, and 2 days basketball, and that's it. If you add into another sport, they'll complain. And why
So that
it has to be
repetition,
consistent.
that consistency and repetition, I love that. Those small moments, the repetitiveness, those daily experiences that they are, being introduced to. So I love that, Ryan. And over time, it's clear that the students most likely begin internalizing those experiences for themselves. So since we're here in this space, David, I want to kind of lean in a little bit. Where have you seen students begin taking greater ownership of themselves, their learning, or even their relationships because of this work? Just like Ryan just shared a few minutes, if something shifts, they're gonna, speak up and speak out about what they like and what they don't like. So where have you seen them begin to take ownership of this?
Yeah, just like how Brian was saying too, it's a lot when it's a brand new club session and we begin to pick our clubs out, and instead of kind of students waiting for that adult uh, uh, um, approval to say, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Go ahead." They're advocating for themselves now, and they're taking much more pride in their interests as well too. So it's nice to see because I know when I was a student myself, I did not have that confidence already built in me in elementary. So it's nice to kind of see it. Okay, these kids get it now. So it's pretty cool to see.
I love that. And I'm curious, what moments made you realize that students were beginning to internalize that language and mindset for themselves? Was there like an aha moment where you felt like there were more, conversations around their agency and what they would like to do and ownership of that? Like, what was that moment? When did that kind of like explode for you that like this is it. This is the moment
Yeah.
for us?
Yeah. I think one moment that stands out to me is when I have like my little shadow, but he's my helper. But then I
Yeah.
say, hey, for today though, I noticed you're gonna try this out in art club. And then he goes, I had no idea I was so good at art, Mr. David. And it's like, dude, wow, let's exactly, man. So let's come back tomorrow, run it back, do it again. How's that sound? And then he's yeah. So it's just seeing them kind of speak out, go away from being my little shadow and constantly being my helper. They're comfortable now being in somewhere they're gonna thrive.
Wow. And I want to say just to you and to everyone here, just thank you for giving our students an opportunity to be able to be in a space to speak up and have that agency and ownership and share the things that they love. And I commend, I was there. I used to be a principal as a kindergarten teacher, but many people don't say thank you enough. So thank you for allowing that and creating a safe space and that connection for your students to be able to have those types of conversations with you. So thank you, Peter.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ms. Jasmine. Thank you. And I think we can never say thank you enough,
Mhm.
again, for being able to do that. But again, Ms. Jasmine, one thing that continues to surface throughout this conversation is that when students begin understanding themselves differently, confidence and relationships begin to shift. As you can see, they start getting a voice. Say, hey, what
Yeah.
happened to soccer, right? If you start switching, they start getting a voice, they start depending on each other and being able to continue to advocate for themselves. I love it. I love it. Just that empowerment. Um, but sometimes the most powerful evidence of this work lives within individual stories. And Maggie, I have to tap on you to this. When you shared a lot of your stories, it brought joy to my heart and actually tears to my eyes. And Maggie, every educator has moments that remind them why this work matters. Is there a specific student story or experience that stayed with you this year?
Thank you, Peter. So that is actually a very hard question because there is a lot of little moments, when you realize that, hey, this isn't just another activity that we have to do, right? So specifically, there's two things that come to mind. One is one of my fourth grade girls, when we first started this, we started with the strengths based, I sit down with the kids, we kind of read over, what their strength profile is. And then kind of made it into a little competition, where who, does the most activities, who shows the most growth, stuff like that. So we started giving out the Thrively Student of the Month awards, but instead of doing just, monthly, we did weekly since we did start later on in the year, and I saw just how impactful it was for our kids to even receive that award. So, when we do give out the awards, we read their strength profile to all of the other kids, just so that, they have that moment to shine and everyone knows all the great things about them. Then we give them their certificate and then we share out with the parents as well. So one of my kids, I noticed that, well, she was that kid that for the whole entire school year, all the staff just felt like, she was that shy kid, very sweet, but just shy. Doesn't talk much, very quiet, won't take initiative, just very to herself. And when she received the award, I saw immediate
Wow.
changes after that. I'm not saying huge changes, but for me and for the staff that noticed that she will never speak out loud or anything like that, she started asking to be a helper to the younger homework group, so that little confidence. And I even noticed that kids were asking her for help on Thrively.
Mm.
So she'll be a homework helper. We allow them extra time to work on Thrively if they're all done with their homework. And the kids will ask her for help, because she'll help out the little ones. Um, so, now she's showing that leadership role. Her dad was very, very happy and surprised when, we asked him to take a photo with her, said all the great things. He got teary-eyed.
Wow.
And there was another student who also received the Thrively certificate. And when I talked to her dad, it was the sweetest thing. He was scared that I wanted to talk to him
Yep.
because, he's been called up a lot, behavior issues. And when I asked him, like when he came to sign her out, I asked him, like, oh, if you have a minute, can I talk to you? Immediately, he was already like, oh no. And so when I presented to him the award and said all the great things about her, he was so surprised. He was so shocked and he opened up a little bit, saying that he's always getting calls from the school, to pick up his kids. They did something wrong. And so he was not expecting that I wanted to just talk to him about, something good and, say all the great things about his child, because I think sometimes like I said, I told Mr. Peter this too, as a parent myself, you know all the great things about your kids, but they're not always gonna show that to other people, right? Unless they feel safe, unless they feel accepted, and that's where the belonging comes in.
Mhm.
But as a parent, I feel like I really felt that from him, that he was so proud of his child in that moment. And he was offering to take her to McDonald's after, and it
I
was
love
just
it.
it was just a beautiful moment to be a part of. And she just you could tell she lit up too as I was talking to her dad, biggest smile on her face. And yeah, so I just think like, this is giving us that opportunity that to be able to have these kind of conversations with parents, be intentional about it and share out all the good things. So yeah, those are some things that come to mind when
I
it
love
comes to, the experience that we've had.
I love that, Maggie, and thank you for sharing that. And what I've heard from just those two stories, and I know you have so many, but it's just that when students feel safe enough to feel seen and known, that
Right.
impact doesn't just stay inside of the classroom. Your
Right.
parents were now involved in the conversations, right? So it really ripples outward into their relationships, into their families, into how students show up in the world. And that was just a kind of beautiful connection to where we're going to go next, which is section 3, student experience and family connection. And one of the clearest indicators that culture is becoming authentic is when students begin carrying the language to confidence and experiences beyond the classroom itself, into their relationships, into their families, into their community spaces. That's when we realize this work is becoming part of their identity. So, Ray, I'd love to tap in here. How have families or caregivers responded when strengths-based language begins extending beyond the classroom and into, after school conversations or conversations at home?
And it's kind of like what to piggyback off what Maggie just said, with dealing with, that child, they got so much out of it, them being able to go home and talk about the language and talk about their feelings and talk about different things they're not always able to talk about.
Mhm.
For my wife growing up, she always, as a Hispanic young lady, she was never able to explain her feelings to her mother without being like, be tough, be strong, do this, do that. And then, once my daughter was born, And now her mother's so, compassionate, this and that. Like my wife tells her, like, where was this when I was younger?
I
Where,
love that.
and it's true. And it comes to the point
Yeah.
where, you know, I needed this too, mom, when I was young,
Mm.
and I'm trying to do this for my daughter. And, it's those tough conversations and it's those tough things that come up. And you know what? Families, some families are afraid to talk about things like that because they feel like they're
Mhm.
getting in too deep. They don't want to make their kids soft, X, Y, and Z. But it's these tough conversations that we can have with our kids, that don't need to be tough.
Yeah.
They're just, mentally tough for some parents because you know what? They never got that experience when they were younger, and they never
Mhm.
got that, feeling of, I had this with my parents when I was younger. So, it really changes out to so many different things. But, the language starting during, Thrively that goes into our staff, that goes into their families, that goes into the next day. Like, hey, I talked to my parents about this yesterday. And you know what? I was telling them what I'm doing in Thrively, and I have this many points, and this is what we're learning. And it's not just, seeing how many points I can get, but what I can get out of it. And,
Yeah.
that hits home a lot harder than anything else.
Wow. That's good, Peter. We're gonna have to have a part two to this and record it. It is just so good. And even just from that, what surfaced in that for me is that our students are they thrive when they feel psychologically safe and they feel safe enough to be seen, right? So Tamaya, I want to punt it back to you here. What does authentic student ownership actually look like in practice beyond just participation or compliance? Like, you have to show up to school. We are in a virtual session, you have to log in. Pam, same for you, you have to log in to school today. What does that authentic student ownership actually look like in practice?
I think it looks like a genuine sense of responsibility and connection.
Mhm.
Like students asking questions, making like good choices, and just reflecting on what they've did previously, contributing ideas in the classroom, rather than just completing it just because you have to do it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's good. And then Maggie, I kind of just want to follow up here on your side. How have relationships between students and adults, now that there's that accountability and there's their agency and that ownership, how have those relationships between students and adults shifted because students feel more safe, seen, and understood?
I feel like the relationships are a lot more authentic now.
Mhm.
We have all of this information that, there's sections on there. So another story, but this
Yeah.
relates to the question.
Yay.
I was scrolling through my kids' the Hope, the Wellbeing check-in
Hmm.
a couple days ago, and then I did notice that, one of my kids needed more attention. She wasn't feeling great throughout the week. And she is, she's been involved in a couple incidents this year, some challenges. And so, the last few times I got to talk to her, it was about because she was doing something wrong or something that she shouldn't have done.
Hmm.
So, I noticed that, she wasn't doing well mentally. So I walkied for her to come over, and she was at her club at the time. When she came in, she looked very confused and very scared. I think she thought she was in trouble for something. And I told her, like, sit down, like, how are you doing? And so she was very confused, So the first part of the conversation, it was just like, come on, get to the point, that's the
Yeah.
vibe I was getting, like, good. And I'm like, no, really, like, how are you doing? How's school going? How's this? How's that? Asking her more specific questions. And then, yeah, I just told her, like, I genuinely just want to know how you're doing. And, I know, or I saw that, you weren't feeling great this week. Is there anything we can do for you? Is there anything I can do to make your day better? And I kid you not, the next day, Mr. Ray was actually on campus that day. We were on our way to a principal meeting. I was going to mention it to him, but we were running late into the meeting. But she's never one to yell, "Hi, Miss Maggie," across campus, never. But that very next day, she did that. She looked very happy. I'm not saying we're miracle makers, but she said hi to me. She was so excited to see me. And that never happens, from this particular student. So I do feel like, Thrively, it gives us that opportunity to have those deeper connections with the kids. It really helps staff with building those relationships. And
Yeah.
the kids are more comfortable sharing out, sometimes on Thrively, writing down how they feel, than going up to you asking, hey, can I talk? Something's wrong. They don't know how to communicate like that. So it gives them a chance and a tool to really just, write how they feel. And then for us to be aware of it and intentionally check in with them. So I
Love
think,
that.
as we use this over time, it's just going to strengthen the relationship between the staff and the kids. So yeah, we're looking forward to doing more with it.
I love it. And what I'm hearing from that is that, ownership is not something we assign to students. It's something that they step into when the conditions are right. But
Yes.
we want to talk about how do we sustain these conditions over time? We've talked about these strategies and our experiences, but we've talked about 180 days. So let's close it out by having our panel talk about what does it actually look like to sustain this work. So our last section, section 4, what defines a Thrively school across 180 days?
Perfect. And like I said, section 4, and we are getting close to the end. So thank you again. And as you said, as we think about sustaining this work across the entire school year, one thing becomes very clear. Culture, like you said, culture is not built on launch week, right? The first week of school, kickoff week, everybody calls it different. It's not built in 1 week. It's
Yeah,
built through repeated, as we heard right now, it's built through repeated experiences that students have consistently over time. It's
yeah,
just they have to experience it, the staff have to experience it over time. And sustaining that kind of culture requires, as you heard, intentional systems, aligned leadership, everybody supporting each other. We've heard that, that mentioned consistent language. We heard about that, even at home, at school, after school programs, that consistent language makes a big difference. And adults continue protecting the vision. And even during difficult season like this year, as Ms. Maggie said, and the rest of the panel has said, is when they start taking that ownership, start knowing who they are, start believing in themselves, that self-esteem goes up. That's how we start to sustain.
I love that. Even when we're feeling like a solid number 4, right, Peter?
Absolutely, even like a 4, you
Like a
get
4.
yourself up and you make it happen.
You
And
make it
like Ms.
happen.
Maggie said, the magic, right? And sometimes I think we are magicians, or we do have that magic wand, or all of us have something, and that's why we chose this field.
Absolutely. And Pam, I kind of want to lend it over to you here to kind of close us out with this last question. When you think about sustaining this work over time, what leadership practices or mindsets have been important in protecting the culture that you were trying to build, that you are building at COA?
I mean, you gotta, as they say on the planes, you have to put your face mask on first, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I think is that it has to start with us and our own mental well-being.
Mhm.
Sustaining culture across 180 days is making sure that 365 days, the adults that are working with the children are staying aligned to the culture. And I really think that's what it is. We only have these children. We have kinder through 12th, as I said. We call them all our babies. Like they're all our kids, every single one of them. Arguably, every single kid is all of our kids because we're in this joint mission together. But it has to start with us. If we can't focus on our own mental well-being and we aren't practicing what we are trying to emulate back out to the principals, to the teachers, to the students, and then back home, it won't reach the capacity it needs to. So I think for sustaining momentum, we need to make sure that as adults, we are continuously learning that, I'm going to throw some habits of mine in here right now, but we need to make sure that we are thinking flexibly, that, we are listening to understand. And it can be listening to understand the culture of the school. Everyone has their own surveys. You need to look at those surveys, right? What do we need? What are parents asking for? What are students asking for? What are teachers asking for? What is the need at the school? And for us at Carolus, obviously clarity and consistency are really key and critical because our first 2 years, we did experience tremendous turnover, and that can negate trust in the environment in which you are in. And thankfully, now we are closing out tomorrow. Tomorrow's our last day of school for our
Oh,
third year. We've got prom tomorrow and then graduation on Saturday. And I think it's just listening to the voices of our families and our students. What did they need? Because it's going to look different everywhere. Definitely, it looks different for me because, we're virtual. So those who are brick and mortar, whether you're parochial or, you are brick and mortar, what have you, but everything's going to look different in some capacity. But at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that our own mental well-being is sharp, it's strong, and if it isn't, that we seek help, we get help, we think interdependently, we work together, we collaborate. We tap on each other for support. Our parents need us. We need our parents. Our teachers need us. We need them. Careless needs you guys. We need Thrively. We need Habits of Mind. We need all of these tools to help us become successful. So I think sustaining culture, we need to, yes, 180 days, that's what we have to work with these kids, but we need to expand it, and that needs to be 365.
That's good, Pam.
Make
I
sure,
love it.
yeah, make sure our mission and vision stay aligned and stay consistent. Make sure that we are getting what we need in order to feel fulfilled and to feel sustained. Because I think that the healthier we are as adults, integral adults in the lives of these students, the better we will be able to present ourselves to our children. They know whether or not we're putting on a show. They're smart. They're really smart. I'm going to argue they're a lot smarter than I am. So they're going to know whether I'm trying to pull one over their head. And I think that, just being humble and going back to the grassroots of what is most important. Everyone has their own vision and mission. You can go to any website. Every single school has their own vision and mission. From day one, Careless has been Kids First, which does align to our authorizer. Our authorizer is the South Carolina Public Charter School District, and our superintendent puts kids first. Every school puts kids first. I'm sure your vision and mission are to put kids first. I mean, listening to Maggie talk about the students, with it's emotional for her, right? As it is for all of us, because we're there to support the children. So I think that we just continuously work with each other. We ask each other for help, for resources. We're there for each other. We provide the necessary support systems, allow each other to vent when needed and necessary and appropriate, so that we can be our best every single day, whether that child walks through the brick and mortar classroom or opens that laptop through the virtual classroom.
I love that so much. Oh, this was so good. I have 1 minute and some tiny little seconds left, but I would love to ask the panel just to pivot for just a second. And there were a few questions in the chat for the panel. If you guys don't mind going in and engaging with those, and we'll stay back just a few minutes extra to answer those live for those that want to answer those live. But as we think about putting today's learning into practice, I want to make sure you leave not just with ideas, but something you can use right away. So inside Thrively on the right side of your dashboard, you'll find the Teacher Resource Center. This space is intentionally designed to connect directly to everything we've explored today around student agency, reflection, hope, and goal setting. It gives you ready-to-use tools that brings that work to life in your classroom. So instead of asking, where do I start on Tuesday? Because Monday's a holiday, you have a place to begin. So as we close today, we want to leave you with something simple. You do not have to implement everything at once. The schools sustaining this work most successfully are often not the ones that my children like to say aren't doing the most. They're the ones creating the most consistent experiences for students over time. So maybe your next step is creating more opportunities for student reflection, introducing strengths-based language, or identifying one intentional practice that reinforcing belonging consistently. And so again, my panelists, thank you so much for being here. So many nuggets today, so much information. Your expertise was amazing. Our guests, thank you again for joining us today. And truly thank you for the work that you do every single day for your students and families. We don't say thank you enough. So as we close, I want to bring us back to where we started. A strengths-based culture is built in conversations, in reflection, in relationships, in moments where students feel genuinely known. And what we heard throughout today's conversation and from our panelists is that this work can happen across different schools, organizations, programs, and learning environments. We had our after-school program represented today. We had a micro school. We had a charter school represented today. So when adults intentionally create the conditions for students to thrive, they will thrive. So as you return to your classrooms and learning communities, we want to leave you with one final reflection question. What's strong with you? Because that question does more than just shift a conversation, it begins to shift culture. So thank you again, everyone. And until next time, let's continue humanizing learning together.